Dan Orvlosky talking about Nick Sirianni. So Dan Orvlosky, who I like a lot, and I think he does a really good job. And before he became a big star at ESPN, he was living in King of Prussia. His wife's from the area. His wife's a big Eagles fan. His entire wife's family, like they're all huge Eagles fans, just like the rest of us. So like it feels like to me, Dan is like that's kind of his adopted team because of his family. How could you not pay extra attention to the Eagles? How could you not almost root for the Eagles, even though like you're supposed to be a reporter, you're supposed to be an analyst, and that's really not what you're supposed to do. But it's impossible not to root for your hometown team or the team you loved growing up, whatever, because he gets a little bit emotional with the Eagles. So Jalen Hurts last week and the week before that couldn't play. And I'm telling you, I do the exact same thing. So this isn't as much of a criticism of Dan Orvlosky as it's just it's an observation because he does the same thing that I do. All right. So he's Jalen Hurts. He can't do this. Jalen Hurts can't do that. Jalen Hurts isn't recognizing this. He's not going through his progressions to where yesterday Jalen Hurts was back to being the greatest Jalen Hurts of all time. And by the way, Jalen's played great, and he should get the praise for sure. Because when the team's not playing well or he's not playing well, as with a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, in particular in Philadelphia, we like to key on the coach and the quarterback. More on the coach in a second. But so like Dan is very emotional with the Eagles. So same thing with Nick Sirianni. So here's Dan Orvlosky yesterday on Get Up on ESPN. And he's talking about the coach because we know on Sunday, the Eagles, it felt like the Eagles won in spite of Nick Sirianni, 0 for 3 on 2-point conversions, 0 for 2 on fourth downs. It seemed like every button he pressed missed yesterday. But Tyler, if we have this, Dan Orvlosky on ESPN yesterday talking about Nick Sirianni and everything else. Are we?
Team, I don't trust the coach. I think this is the only legit playoff contender where the coach is a question mark. The coach is a question mark. No coach takes more points off the board than Nick Sirianni. It's unacceptable that they continue, and beyond lucky that Trevor Lawrence throws that interception. Because if Trevor Lawrence leads their team down and they win that football game, I don't think Nick Sirianni's walking in Tuesday morning as the head coach of the football team. That's that bad. The decision-making, the 2-point conversions when they're unnecessary, they're constantly going for it on fourth down. It's almost like I'm talking about Jordan Love. There's a difference between being aggressive and being reckless. And right now, the decision-making is reckless because the team is so talented. The offense has become so explosive. But you got to manage these situations better because I don't trust them versus Dan Campbell and Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur when it comes to those NFC playoff races.
There's so much there. To get to what he said, let's start with what he said last. He doesn't trust him against Dan Campbell and Matt LaFleur and Sean McVay. Well, like I'm not telling you that Nick Sirianni is going to out-scheme Sean McVay or he's a better offensive coach than Matt LaFleur and like whatever. Dan Campbell, I watch a lot of NFL football. I watch pretty much every primetime game. I watch Red Zone. I watch a lot of NFL football. And I know from watching the Lions that Dan Campbell makes the same kind of decisions that Nick Sirianni makes. He goes for it on fourth down. He can be a little bit reckless, if you want to use that word. I think Dan Campbell is a better coach than Nick Sirianni right now because the Lions have great talent and they're rolling on offense. Dan Campbell has made plenty of decisions calling for replay, not challenging calls, whatever else, to where you watch it and you're like, he's going to cost the team a game with a bad decision. So he's not the best decision maker during a game. Go watch a Lions game. The reason why you're not paying attention to that or it doesn't feel like that is they're scoring 40-plus points every week and they're blowing fools out of games. Nick Sirianni, the Eagles almost blew that game, right? So, yeah, like they almost blew the game. So the finger's going to get pointed at Nick Sirianni. More on that in a second. I don't feel like Nick Sirianni is reckless during games. He went for it. He went for the 2-point conversions. I hate that he went for the 2-point conversions. I hate that he kept chasing the 2-point conversions. I hate when the defense makes a penalty and it gets into the 1-yard line. They'll take an extra point off the board to go for a 2-point conversion. I hate it. I want the point pretty much every time, unless it's 16-0. You need a 2-point conversion. It's 24-0. Go for a 2-point conversion. Don't chase the points, especially in the first half. I hate it, but teams do it. I don't think it's Nick Sirianni's idea. He's not going off the grid too much. Going for it on 4th down. Again, this is something, if you watch the games, a lot of teams do. They go for it on 4th down. A lot. I hate it when it doesn't work. I love it when it works. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked a lot. He's not reckless with it. I don't necessarily like it. It doesn't feel like he manages a game well, like the Jags game. It didn't feel like he managed that game well. In that game, I take the field goal or I don't go for a 2-point conversion because their offense couldn't do squat. So take the points. Your defense was leaning on them heavy. If they would have lost that game, I don't think Nick Sirianni gets fired. I'm not telling you, I'm not saying he should be fired after he loses that game. I don't think the Eagles fire him, but that would have been an all-time collapse. And the Kobe D bailed him out. Let's be honest. Like, we can say, 0 for 3 and 0 for 2 and whatever else. They almost lost that freaking game. That can't happen. That's on the head coach. But a lot of what Dan Orlovsky's saying is emotion from almost losing that game. The decisions itself, like, all right, I didn't like a lot of them, but he wasn't going off the grid to where you said, like, why? If they have whatever stupid chart they have for going for 2 or when they go for 2 or when they go for it on a 4th down, it's not Nick Sirianni that developed this idea. He's just following a chart. It's like playing blackjack. I don't play blackjack, but I used to play a lot of blackjack. Bet Parks, shout out, by the way. Get up to Parks Casino. Every single time, if you have 16 and the dealer's showing a king, you hit. Even though you know you're probably going to bust, but you have to take the hit for the table. You have to be consistent with what you do in blackjack. You have to. Because unless you're counting into a deck, which nobody's doing out there, then you just have to be consistent. That's the only way I'll play. And if somebody's on my table that isn't doing that, I'll leave. Or I want them to leave. Because you screw up the mojo, you screw up the deck and everything else. It's kind of what Nick Sirianni's doing in a lot of cases. He's being consistent with going forward on 4th down. He's being consistent with going for the 2-point conversion. I don't like it because analytics, it's not the same in every game. Not every game is going the same way. Like, if your defense stinks and you can't get a stop, then maybe you are going for the 2-point conversion because you're trying to make up as many points as possible. Maybe when your defense is playing great, you go for the field goal, right? Like, it matters. The analytics, same thing with baseball. Analytics matter, but it can't be the entire story. And it feels like, to me, he's got a bad feel for what's going on in a game, when to use the 2-point conversion, when to not go for the 2-point conversion, when to take the field goal, when not to take the field goal. Honestly, like the fourth and inches that they didn't convert, the play call sucked. The idea to go for it on 4th down, I don't think that was a bad call. So I think we're still emotional. I'm guilty of it as well. I didn't think that Nick Sirianni gave the Eagles the best chance to win it in the 4th quarter. I thought he had a bad feel for the game, especially late.